you and a heartfelt namaste. I, Anuradha, would like to thank all of you for liking, sharing, and subscribing to our YouTube and Spotify channels and writing in your views and your comments there. Today, we have with us James Braha. James, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, James, on Facebook, I've been reading a lot about your Braha Sutras, and I've also been reading your Braha Sutras, not just about the Braha Sutras.
Don't tell anybody, those are private.
So, James, would you like to talk about those sutras, a few of those sutras today with us?
Yeah, and so let me just say that it's always very dangerous to say when you think a book is going to come out. Last time I did it, I was about 6 months late. But I am right now reading the last. I decided to make 216 sutras, 108 plus 108. It'll all be in the same book, and I'm basically, just going through the book so that probably Monday I'll send it to the editor. I've been working on this since November of last year. And it's shocking me how long it's taking. It's taking much longer. Not that I had any particular time frame in mind, but there comes a point when I get kind of tired of writing. And then there comes a point where I've been for the last 6 weeks, where it seems like the end is right there. So I start going faster and I'm getting tired because I'm working furiously to finish. And anyway, so we are close to the end. So I'm assuming it'll be out in November, December at the latest. And it's going to be a very special book. The feeling that I actually get from it is that I wrote these 2 books. I wrote the Ancient Hindu Astrology in 1985. Then I wrote the Braha Sutras in 2021. And in between were, 5 or 6 books. But these are the 2 main books.
And you've also re-revised your book, right?
I've revised that Ancient Hindu Astrology in 2020. The first book actually explained how the Hindu system works, and it kind of changed the astrological world in the West. This particular book, even though I've written 5 or 6 in between, this particular book is so experience oriented. It's so much about my experience. And there are certain themes that kind of underlie the book. And one of the main themes is that astrologers are always looking for tips. And, that's what the sutras are. It's 216 tips that you can use that I've learned. But really the underlying theme, and it comprises several of the sutras, is that there's no way to practice astrology by learning and memorizing the facts and getting tips. It doesn't work that way, because it's basically an intellectual process where you do have to learn the basics. And then you have to sit with the horoscope and you have to dwell on it and you have to contemplate it. I was working on a sutra the other day, just simple common sense that you need preparation. I've been doing this 40 years. There's lots of charts. I can look at them and right away I know what's going on, but there's lots that are not like that. So I draw my charts at the beginning of the week. And if I see one that's complicated, I set it aside. I want to look at that at night before going to bed. I want to be able to, because if they're confusing, when you get a confusing horoscope, you focus and you concentrate and you zoom in and you look at the exact degrees. Yes, Saturn's aspecting something within 7 degrees, but Jupiter's aspecting within 2 degrees. So it's not so bad. So you zone in on all the specifics, but some horoscopes go nowhere. The sum of the parts leaves you with nothing because they're so confusing. And these kind of charts, the more you focus, it's not going to help. And so what you need is some contemplation. So I may look at a chart, a couple nights before, and then the next day. So that way, there's a contemplation process that goes on. But also, when you're doing horoscopes, it has to be a situation where you learn to trust your mind, because there's, I'm doing this 40 years. If I see some very crazy aspects in a chart, I can't run to someone and say, what does this mean? And that's what students, what does this mean? Well, what does it mean? It means total confusion. You better sit and think about it, and you better figure out the techniques that work and don't work. Here's one for you. I haven't listed this. This is the amazing thing about the Braha Sutras, is that because there was no overlying, it wasn't about one particular issue. It was about, all these different points that I gave in a lecture in 2019. But then when I started the process, I would wake up one day and say, oh, I better talk about this. Or a client would say something and I say, oh, I better teach that. So there's all these diverse things. And one of the things that I stopped using decades ago, and this was hard to let go of. Some of them were easy. Vargotama, the damn thing never worked. I don't use it. You could say whatever you want. The solar return chart, the Varshapal, doesn't work. You could say whatever you want. But this is one that took a long time to let go of. Oh, look, Jupiter's transiting your fourth house, and the fourth house is Pisces. This is going to be a better than usual transit. Oh, Saturn's transiting your fifth house, but your fifth house is Aries. So Saturn's going to be going through its fallen sign. It's going to be worse than usual. The logic of that is impeccable. It's impeccable. Of course, it should work that way. I just haven't ever found it to be anything special. I just haven't. So in the book, I constantly say, these are the Braha Sutras, not God's sutras. I'm going to tell you what I find works, and you can test them for yourself. But so many of the times what we do is, I know what I did with that is I said, well, it has to work. Everybody says it works and it makes perfect sense. But every time I would look at my transits, my wife's transits, my son's transits, never did anything special just because it was going through. Now, what does work when you're looking at transits is to look at the Ashtakvarga. The Ashtakvarga is the point system. For example, I think I have 42 points in my second house, which is writing and teaching and money. So that's a strong house. Just the fact that it has a lot of points, it's not said to be about the house being strong. It's said to be, oh, there's 42 points in there. So when a benefic goes through that house, the effects are better. When a malefic goes through that house, the effects aren't so bad. But in general, you can look at the Ashtakvarga, and if you see a house with very few points, it's a weak house. It's going to weaken it because there's always transits going on and they're not going to do anything. So, and I want to mention transits as well. It's amazing. It's amazing how many times I can teach something, how many times I can talk about it. And it goes in people in their ears and out the others. And I'm finally coming to terms with this because astrology is so vast. It's so vast that you have to prioritize. So you prioritize. In this book, I actually ask for help with sati. I have done everything I can do to explain that sati is the biggest superstition, more than Rahu and Ketu being evil. The superstition that sati ruins 18. If you live to 80 years old, sati is 18 years. Repeat. If you live to 80, sati is 18 years. Have you ever heard a person on their deathbed say, God, life was pretty good, but if only I didn't have those 18 years, they were so bad. You ever heard anybody say that? No, because it's a superstition. But in the book, I actually ask people for help with this because there's so many things that I have put forth in Jyotish, things that were not in Jyotish books anywhere, but I knew them from Western astrology. And so many of those things have taken hold. But sati, I can't do it. I need the help of the client, of the people who hear my lectures that when the client says, I'm scared of sati, that they should say, oh, really? That's 1/4 of your life. Has 1/4 of your life been horrible?
Exactly my point, and exactly a point of many seniors also, because they find it so funny that we kind of blame everything on that poor Saturn, and then there's Daya, then there is all these other Kantak and Shani, and yes.
You know, I'm going to tell you something. One of the sutras here is about using common sense. Only the title of the sutra is something like, astrologers are necessarily gullible and naive. Why we have to use common sense. And I explain in the sutra that the question isn't why are astrologers gullible and naive. The question isn't the question is really, why aren't we more gullible and more naive? We're already incredibly gullible. But you see, there's a axiom or a truth, a truism. It's called Occam's razor. Occam's razor makes the statement that the most obvious explanation for something is usually the truth. The conspiracies and all that stuff is mostly garbage, not always, but mostly garbage. And the most obvious explanation is usually the truth. Astrologers read that and they go, oh my God, are they crazy? I'm seeing things from the stars. It has nothing to do with, for you, oh, you accidentally knocked something over and it caused a leak in the house. And we're saying, no, it's not because you knocked it over. It's because Neptune hit your 4th house cusp. So we're looking for these reasons that are completely opposite common sense. Therefore, it makes us gullible. So if something happens to a person and we can't find it in the horoscope, we make something up. Oh, it must. I remember this one. This is my favorite. This guy told me that he had an accident, and the astrologer couldn't find any reason for it. And he said, well, what color was the car? He said, blue. He said, well, it was a Saturn colored car. That's why you had an accident. That is as gullible and silly as can be. So that's one of the sutras. I mean, this book, it just goes all over the place, comprising so many different issues. But I want to go back to transits. So the transits, and I've said this for 40 years, and still people, don't always get it. But in the books, you see that the transits should be done from the moon. They don't say that it should be done from the ascendant and the moon. It's common sense. It's common sense if you think of, first of all, Jyotish is an oral tradition, not written. So the students already know it, but they're putting it there because the students are forgetting to use also the transits from the moon. So you have to use both. It's common sense that the transits from the ascendant are more important because there's 12 ascendants. Anybody born the day I was born, they were going to have the same exact transits because the moon is in the same place for all of us. But based on the birth time, the houses are going to get completely different transits. But so when you're looking at the transits, what you're basically looking for is how many times does Jupiter aspect a feature. So if you see Jupiter transiting somebody's 4th house, you think they might get a new home. So then you look, it's transiting the 4th house. That's one good part. Jupiter might also be aspecting the ruler of the 4th house. That's 2. Jupiter could also be transiting the 4th house from the moon, and it could be aspecting the ruler of the 4th house from the moon. If the moon is in Capricorn, then Cancer, then Aries would be the 4th house from the moon. And if it gets an aspect, so you have 4 positives. Then you look to see, is Saturn aspecting the 4th house? Is it transiting the 4th house? Is it aspecting the 4th from the moon? the fourth ruler. And so you go by the numbers. And if you see Jupiter is transiting the seventh house and making a lot of aspects to the seventh ruler and the seventh from the moon, but Saturn is also doing one or two, you'll know the person will have a relationship, but it won't produce. Now, it's possible a year later or 2 years later, they could marry that same person because it's time for marriage. It's not about the person that they're with. And I was also talking about the fact that people will ask questions of astrologers that they shouldn't answer, that they can't answer honestly. Oh, this is a really good year for marriage. Well, or next year is going to be a good year for marriage. Is it the same? Is it going to be the person I'm with? Is it going to be someone from years ago? You can't know the answer to that. You can take a guess from your intuition, but you need to fess up and say, well, that's not something I can tell from astrology. And astrologers have to understand that there's a certain amount that you can know, and there's a certain amount you don't know. Let's see. Okay, here's one. Here's another sutra. Sometimes I'll be talking to a client, and they will say, this planet rules the eighth house, so it's afflicted. This planet is the Yoga Karaka, so it is gaining more power. This is not true. The planet that rules the bad house carries some negative energy, but it's not afflicted. The planet that is the Raja Yoga Karaka carries some good energy, but it's not particularly strengthened. So I mentioned in the book to use one of the other sutras. One of the other sutras is about personifying the planets so that you can see how they work. So you take a case where Venus is, let me see how to do this. You take a case where the sun is in 5 Taurus and Jupiter is in 7 Taurus, and then Saturn is like 8 Taurus, right? And so the guy starts complaining about everything, and the sun will be terrible. I say, but wait a minute, the sun is right next to Venus, and Venus is in between the malefic, or Jupiter's in between the sun, Jupiter, Saturn. Jupiter's right next to that sun. He says, oh, the sun's going to be terrible because it's with Saturn. No, it's being protected by Jupiter. But if you use the personification, you say that whoever is the sun has a problem. But there's Jupiter saying, hey, I know there's a biker over there with tattoos and he's steaming mad. I got your back covered, right? Like that. But on the other hand, you take Jupiter, and Jupiter has the sun on one side, a malefic, and Saturn on the other side. And Jupiter calls up his lawyer and says, listen, man, get me out of here. I got somebody who's wanting to kill me on this side, and I got a biker on the other side. So you're personifying these planets. That will help you with your astrology. Personify them.
That's a beautiful description. That's a beautiful description, James.
So when you're personifying the planet that rules bad houses and the planet that is ruling good houses, it's like this. The planet that is a functional malefic that carries some negative energy, it's a benefic by nature, but it carries Jupiter, but it rules the 8th house. It's Jupiter, but it carries some bad energy. So it doesn't become completely bad. It's like this. Imagine a loved one that you know, that you trust, that's always been good to you. Now they get some stress or some pressure in life. Do they suddenly turn against you and start to harm you? No. They still have the good heart. They still love you. And while they try to protect you, they might make a few mistakes. They don't become malefic. They don't suddenly, Jupiter doesn't, the person that's always loved you doesn't suddenly turn against you. No, they still love you. They make some mistakes. That's a functional benefic. The functional malefic has always been trouble. And I liken that to a tiger. Figure a malefic, like a tiger in the jungle. The tiger goes around eating other animals and doing what it wants and killing. Does it become weak? Does it become harmed? No, it's having a great time. It's fine. It doesn't lose its nature. So those are, you know, that's the way some of these, you know, the sutras go. They just go all over the place, and it's a wonderful teaching manual. But it stresses that you have to take charge, and you have to trust your intellect, and you have to delve deep, and you have to make the decisions, and you have to stop saying, well, let me go find out what the teacher says. That's not going to work, because none of us are perfect. We don't know it all. We never will.
James, it's been a beautiful session, a very crisp session. And I really liked your description of Jupiter calling his lawyer and saying, hey, get me out of here.
Out of here. I got one guy on this side and the other guy. Between the two of them, I'm going to be dead.
So next time we want to understand conjunctions, we want to understand more than one planet together, personify them. They're beautiful to work with. Till we meet with...
You can consider them gods, you know, and you know, there was this on Facebook. There was a client who said, "Where do the sutras come from?" And I got a great laugh out of this, as if I found them in some books or I channeled them or something like that. But the more that I thought about where the sutras came from, the more fascinating the answer. The answer comes from exactly what I'm trying to explain for people to do in their practice, which is to search for the truth, to always be honest and not rationalize and not make up excuses, and you know, the things that you have to do as an astrologer. If you follow those paths, you're always seeking the truth. When you don't know something, you admit, I don't know that. If you follow that kind of path and you're looking for the truth, because that's what I'm doing when I'm writing the sutras, I start to think, how does this work? But it's the tendencies of actually doing the right thing, of actually not taking the easy. There's a million ways to take the easy way out with astrology. Don't bother checking if the Varga ascendant is correct. Don't bother with it. Don't bother asking if the birth time's right when it's when they give you 11 o'clock or 2. So don't bother with the Bhava chart. There's a million ways to take the easy way out. And so I explain this in the introduction, that you've got to come to terms with actually doing the right thing and maintaining integrity. And the more that you do that, the more the truth comes. The more you can not know what it is, but you're behaving properly astrologically. You're doing the thought process properly. You're not running to someone and say, hey, what's the answer? Or, hey, that guy said that. Yeah, that guy said that. Did you test it? So you do the right thing. And then when you're looking for information, suddenly I run to Vashti and I say, Vashti, look at what Shiva gave me. Listen to the sutra.
Yes, I read that and it was beautiful, James. It was really beautiful. We meet with James again. Write in your questions, what you have, what you want to know about sutras more. Until we meet with James again, thank you so much.
Please hit the bell icon for fresh updates. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on the videos, and please subscribe to our channel.